Let's talk about Hollywood in general, and we don't often see a movie which is feel-good, beautifully made, and revolves around families and relationship. Combine all this and we have Uncle Frank. Pretty relatable, and you are sure to find yourself transported into the overall setting of the storytelling. Written and directed by Alan Ball, Uncle Frank is a 2020 American comedy drama film. The film features Paul Bettany, who has given undoubtedly his career best performance in this movie so far, and Sophia Lillis as the central character. The movie starts in the summer of 1969 and moves 4 years forward after an initial introduction by our very own Beth, a role played to perfection by Sophia Lillis, which introduces Uncle Frank, played by Paul Bettany, to the viewers. The movies start unfolding from 1973 when Beth moves to New York City for her higher education and joins the company of Uncle Frank. Set in the 70s, Uncle Frank is a road movie about a gay man who comes in open from his sexual orientation. This movie was premiered at the Sundance Film Festival on January 25, 2020. It was later released by Amazon Studios on November 25, 2020. Story outline. Set in a small town of America, Creekville and New York City during the 70s, this movie Uncle Frank is about car trip of a gay literature professor, Uncle Frank, portrayed by Paul Bettany, his lover Waleed, played by Peter Macdissi, together with his teenage niece Beth. Uncle Frank, Beth, and the story starts. The year is the summer of 1969, and we have our central character Beth narrating the story of Uncle Frank and the kind of fondness she has developed for Uncle Frank. The setting is of a small town called Creekville in South America. She is also amused by the fact that why not everyone in the family likes Uncle Frank. Even though he is smart, suave, and speaks intelligently. The movie starts with a scene where Uncle Frank gives automatic shoe police to his father on his birthday, and his father tells him that, "Does Uncle Frank think I am so old to police my one shoes?" And Uncle Frank replies that it is nothing like that, and he has chosen this gift because it is fast, it is quick, and it polishes the shoes quite well. Beth Bledsoe meets a guy at the college, and soon he becomes her boyfriend. On an occasion, while making out, Beth is not quite comfortable with his sexual acts, and her guys say it is okay, and they will take it slow for now. Her boyfriend also requests her to introduce him to Uncle Frank, as he is quite impressed by his literary genius. Uninvited to the party, Beth along with his boyfriend visits Uncle Frank at his office, where Frank tells him that he is currently occupied as he has a test assignment to complete. Beth and her boyfriend leave and overhear a conversation about a party which is happening at Frank's house tonight. Beth Bledsoe and her boyfriend arrive unannounced at Frank's apartment. Secret unfolds. When Beth and her boyfriend arrive at Frank's apartment, they were welcomed by Waleed. He tells her that the rent is pretty high in New York City, so he shares the apartment with Uncle Frank. Through events that occur at the party, Beth discovers that her Uncle Frank is gay and still hiding in a closet. Frank is living with his gay partner, Wally, for 10 years now in New York City. At the party, Frank rebuffs the sexual advance from Beth's boyfriend and warns Beth to stay away from her boyfriend as he is into same-sex, gay like him. Beth gets too drunk at the party and Frank gets extremely caring for her. That impresses Beth even more. Frank pleads with Beth not to tell anyone else in the family about his sexual orientation, and Beth agrees. Sad news. The very next day at the breakfast table, Frank receives a call and gets the information that Beth's grandfather and Uncle Frank's father, Daddy Mac, had died of a sudden heart attack. Grieved Uncle Frank plans a road trip from New York City to South Carolina to take part in his dad's funeral along with Beth. Wally tries hard to join the trip as he wants to be with Frank during these trying times, but Frank refuses, leaving him shattered, and embarks on a road trip with Beth. Frank was not yet ready to reveal the truth to his family members. Wally joins the trip. Sad with Frank's departure, Wally rents a car and follows most of the way there. With much emotional outburst, Frank agrees to let him come. They planned to stay at a motel during the funeral as Fran was fearful of the locals' reaction in case they discover their true identity. Painful flashback. As the journey progresses, Frank have flashbacks to his growing up years and his first liking for a boy named Samuel. And how they used to swim together in a nearby lake. Once while engaged in a sexual act with Samuel, Frank's father caught them in bed together and called Frank a faggot, a sin to be engaged in same-sex act and abomination against God. To come to terms with these memories, Frank starts secretly drinking. Frank also tells Beth not to tell Wally that he takes alcohol. At the funeral and a will. With Wally staying in a town motel, Beth and Frank finally arrive home to attend the funeral. Everyone is happy at home seeing Frank back, and his sister is particularly happy. Here Frank encounters the same old relatives who keep asking Frank about his age and any luck with the females so far, unaware of the fact that Frank is a gay. Finally, they all proceeds with the funeral, and it is the time for the will. At the reading of the will, Frank comes to know that he has been left out of any inheritance from his father, and the will also expose Frank's homosexuality to the entire family member present there. Climax. Crestfallen with the entire development and emotional, Frank flees, driving away erratically while drinking heavily. Beth comes to know what happened at the will reading session with Uncle Frank and borrows his father's car and rushes to Wally and inquires if Frank is here. Wally comes to know what happened at the funeral and the will reading session. Wally knows where they might find Frank as he was aware of that painful past. We have a final flashback that reveals that Samuel drowned himself in the lake when Frank, right after a bashing from his father, comes to Samuel and tells him that they cannot be together. This homosexuality displeases the god and whether he would like to be called as a faggot. When Wally and Beth reach at the lake, they discover Frank's cloth on the deck by the water. They don't see Frank anywhere. They both return to the motel aggrieved heavily, thinking that Frank might have drowned himself after being guilt-ridden for Samuel's death. Happy reunion. Wally and Beth return to the motel with empty heart. Wally is deeply grieved, thinking that Frank has drowned himself like Samuel in the lake. However, thanks to a planned happy ending, a drunken Frank returns, claiming he just went for a swim. A violent argument erupts as Wally confronts Frank for his drinking habits. Frank punches Wally on his chin and calls him a faggot, flees again. Frank goes to his dad's grave and calls him a coward for not speaking anything on his face. He finally visits Samuel's grave and expresses guilt for his death, where Wally joins him too and comforts him. Frank tells Wally that he has no family left, and Wally assures him that they are the family to each other. Beth arrives and requests Frank to come home, and Frank comes home with Wally and introduces him to everyone. While Frank's brother-in-law is unable to accept this truth, his siblings and mother have no problem with it and welcome Wally warmly in their family. And the movie ends on a happy note. During a one-on-one conversation with Uncle Frank, Beth is quite impressed when Uncle Frank advises her to follow her dreams and try to be the one she would like to be and not what everyone wants her to be. Fast forward 4 years. The story takes a 4-year jump from here, and we have New York City now. The year is 1973, and Beth is an 18-year-old college-going girl now who secures her admission in New York City. Beth is happy as her uncle Frank Bledsoe is a professor at the college, and she will have the great opportunity to be in the company of a refined and thoughtful man than the rest of his family, Uncle Frank.